Hello and welcome to all new First Issues, the weekly #1 comic review show. I'm the Archivist and these are the new releases for the week of April 20th, 2016. Yes, there's a new layout, I hope you like it, or not. Anyways, we've got a hefty haul, so let's slide right in. We start with Marvel's Captain America Road to War #1, written by Will Corona Pilgrim, art by Andrea DeVito, with colors by Laura Villardi. So we have the Road to Civil War, but not the current Civil War II event that's happening in the comics or about to happen in the comics. Nope, this is just adding to why we shouldn't like Tony Stark for the Civil War movie coming out next month. Main plot is just the current team of Avengers having to smash an Ultron robot in Eastern Europe. All the while, Tony's designing his iron glove thing that we see in the trailer. Honestly, this is totally skippable, but not because of the writing or the art, which are both fairly good. Pilgrim does a good job at giving the basics of the team while hinting at the jackassery of Tony Stark. And the art itself works really well to showcase the universe of the movie with colors to match, though brighter than the trailer for Civil War would suggest. No, the reason I'm going to say that this is skippable is the same reason that the rest of the MCU tie-in comics have basically been skippable. They never tie into the actual events of the movie, and have on occasion actually contradicted the film universe they're in. I mean, come on, they fight a giant robot that looks like Ultron, and no, it's not actually Ultron, but something like that would at least make a list of things they've done. Maybe it will, but either way, if you're interested in the MCU, then you may just want to make the Road to War a marathon of the films, but it's not a bad read, just sort of pointless, so if you want more of the MCU universe, then this is worth a read. Otherwise, it's totally skippable. Sorry. And on the opposite end of the spectrum, there's Marvel's The Drawing of the Three, Bitter Medicine, #1, script by Peter David, art by Jonathan Marks, with colors by Lee Longbridge, based off the epic series The Dark Tower by Stephen King. If you haven't read the Dark Tower series yet, then you should. It's Stephen King's magnum opus and truly a grand adventure. But if you don't have time to read 7 thick-as-hell books about a gunslinger, a New York junkie, and a legless black woman, not to mention a badger-looking thing, and a boy, a couple boys, well, technically the same boy just a couple times over, then these comics are truly perfection. This particular run is about the drawing of Odette Walker through the magical beach doors, and how, while she's not that bad, the other personality in her head hates Roland and Eddie because they dumbass honky mafas. Now, the reason that I think that these are actually perfect adaptations of the books has actually very little to do with the story. While I do love the book series, what I've loved most about these comics, and I do gush about them profusely on my Facebook page when I first read them, is that they don't deviate from the set narrative, but they enhance it. It takes so long to get Odette through the door in the books, but in this, the visuals just explode out and make it an epic that pushes the narrative along, working in conjunction with the dialogue and the actual words to heighten it to masterpiece levels. And when it comes to Roland entering the shattered mind of Odette, there is no better way to show it than the surreal visuals they use, especially of 2 back-to-back women and a snake. But anyways, of course this is a buy. This was already on my pull list, and it should be on yours, whether you've read the novels or not. Another top-tier book. Now we move into a land of both shadow and substance. Dynamite's The Twilight Zone, The Shadow, written by David Avalon, art by Dave Acosta, and colors by Omi Remolante. Imagine, if you will, a New York Nazi rally being torn apart by a man in a saggy black hat. But as he and his cohorts leave, explosions flip their car, sending the Shadow into the Twilight Zone. Wow, that almost turned into a Zap Brannigan. GIF! Let's go to the Twilight Zone! I'll stop that now. Anyways, yes, the plot to this is actually totally awesome, though you may be lost if you've never heard of the character before, because, and I hope you guys can keep up with this, the story is about Kent Allard, the original alias for the man behind the mask in the original print version of The Shadow, waking up as Lamont Cranston, who was the Shadow in the radio show and the film that came out, but in print has been a reluctant ally who Kent pretends to be on occasion. But even then, the rabbit hole goes even deeper as he then wakes up as the boy Preston, holding a script for the Shadow in his hand. I'm all in. That was both a blast of greatness for the Shadow, and yet at the same time, I had absolutely no idea what the hell was going on. But it's brilliant in that regard. While I did make it sound really complicated, it's not actually. The story is fairly easy to follow in knowing who everyone is and how it all lays out. But it isn't until the end where we get the Rod Serling voiceover, so the mystery deepens, and I can only hope that Dynamite does this for the rest of their licensed books. Oh, and the art is fantastic, crisp, but still unique for every life that Kent Allard lives in this. So even if you don't know about the Shadow, this is the book that will either make you really crave reading the other superb Shadow comics from Dynamite, or you'll be confused. Either way, go out and buy this right now. Next up, we check out the 5-0. Images, Aloha, Hawaiian Dick, written by B. Clay Moore with art by Jacob Wyatt. Ah, so it's a sequel to a comic that I haven't read, is it? Okay, let's dive in blind. So the recap lets us know what happens last series, which, by the way, reading that and seeing the not quite epilogue jazz interlude at the end of this, I'm really thinking that I may do an Amos comic trailer on this, if I can get the issues I need on my budget. Anyways, short recap, one of the brothers, Bird, shot another one and is now in Honolulu. 20 years later, another Bird brother is on his way to Honolulu. Like I said, after reading this, I definitely need to check out the first series, because this made it a definite read. I do love this art, which is not crisp, but it's definitely tight. Actually, the best way to describe the style, at least to me, is this very old 70s VHS. You know, where you can definitely clearly see what's going on, but by God, have the colors gotten a bit fuzzy over the years. Most likely it's not what they were going for, but hey, it added a level of enjoyment to me, so I can't say it's a negative. As for the writing, well, it's a tropical noir. Or rather, it's about to be. See, Mike Bird, the brother I talked about going to Honolulu, is actually a fairly solid lead to follow, not being a hard-boiled detective. In fact, the best way to describe him is he's a really bad poker player who just so happens to be a gumshoe whenever he needs the money, which really shows when he gets spotted and has to do a thing for a guy. If you go into this expecting Hawaii 5-0 or some hard-boiled Humphrey Bogart level detective, then you're not going to find what you're looking for. But I think just picking this up, you'll get something that you weren't expecting in the best way. So definitely go out and give this a buy. Now let's sink our teeth into Images Chew, Demon Chicken Poyo, written by John Layman and art by Rob Guillory. Poyo's a chicken, I tell ya, regular chicken! I have no clue where to begin with this. The plot to this is a possessed girl is read a comic by a priest to get her unpossessed. Yeah. And the comic itself seems to be Poyo the badass chicken saving Christmas from the grump ass and then a disgruntled Santa Claus. But this comic is special, as it summons someone, or something. Could it be Satan? No, it's Poyo! I got nothing. It's a bombastic book that you kind of need to be on the same good hallucinogens to fully understand. Okay, that's not true. The book is easy to follow, just weird in the weird way. I mean, come on, the whole plot revolves around a demon chicken. There's not a lot to say, really. It's a fantastically fun in the obtusest, yes, I'm gonna say the word obtusest, of ways, with art to match. But even in that craziness, you can see that these are a skilled writer and artist just letting go and having a blast doing this book. And honestly, if any part of that summary made you go, wait, what? Then you need to get this right now. I mean, I was expecting a Chew special or something, but this is indeed very, very special. I'm fairly sure that this would make Grant Morrison blush in over-the-toppery. So go now, buy and read, because like hell if I'm the only one who now has to have this in their head. Going completely in the opposite direction, we have IDW Star Trek Manifest Destiny, written by Mike Johnson and Ryan Parrott, art by Angel Hernandez, and colors by Esther Sands. The Klingon Empire claims another planet, though Commander Shotach is not using the rules of honor to ensure conquest. Meanwhile, the Enterprise is star trekking across the universe and uncovers a distress beacon. They go to check it out, but it's an ambush. The away team is attacked with one of the red shirts being killed, 'cause obvious. And a new version of a Klingon, well, I want to say that it looks like a modified Raptor, but I can easily be wrong, decloaks and fires on the ship. But the Enterprise gets a good shot in, so now they're being boarded by a Klingon assault team. When it comes to Star Trek, I'm kind of the mind that a good story doesn't involve giant explosions or overly long action scenes. That was probably my only complaint about the films, is that they were geared in that fashion. And yes, this does have some heavy action scenes, such as like the last third of the book being basically just that. But unlike the Abrams flicks, this works to great effect because we're being shown Shotach's tactics and methods from the start to finish aren't exactly the Klingon way. Not to mention, with being static images, the action is far more easy to see and not as jarring when it jumps to dialogue-led scenes, so it all works out very well. The characters themselves feel like the ones from the movie, with their personalities very much intact as well as somewhat humorous moments. As for the art, another great. The Klingons are unique, obviously not going for the original show's design but opting for the cranial ridges, but that's neither here nor there. But they feel different than the Federation cast, which is just what you need in new enemies, not to mention the great look of the ships all around. It's just all around a good comic. And I've said before about how tie-in comics really are a bit of a mess to buy, but IDW has been handling these books for a good while now, and it's never been at odds with the movies, so it is a must-buy on my end at least. Even non-Trekkies can probably get a very positive outcome from this, since they set up motivations, characters, and everything really well. So go out and get it. And if you don't want to do that, then at least pick it up in its original Klingon. Seriously though, they have a Klingon edition out. Great hard copy buy. For fun. Well, I guess you can say that this next comic is Aftershock? Seriously, why the hell did I write that? Anyways, here's Aftershocks, Black-Eyed Kids, written by Joe Pruitt, art by Simon Kudransky, and colors by Guy Major. A rash of murders are cropping up in a small town, all made by children, well, teens it looks like, with blacked out eyes. Do we have a Village of the Damned thing going on, or is it just the cult of the Black Thorn? Who knows? Please, sir, I want some more. When I read the preview of this in Jackpot, I was curious. But now after reading this, you have my undying attention. This is definitely a horror title, but it is also the lead up to the mystery of all this going down, rather than jumping right into this super evil mumbo jumbo. What I like is that we get to see, at least in the narrative of this one, that they're killing for a specific reason. But even greater, we see the build up to the final few pages where we are given that these kids started out as regular normal kids, and that the BEKs are not some demons pretending to be kids, but okay, actually they could be anything, but that's part of the great read, because afterwards your tank is full with wonder and intrigue, wanting to read more and more to get these answers. Yes, this issue is all set up, but it sets up in the best way in that it grabs you and never lets you go with the suspense. And yes, the art is a big part of that. It drips with the atmosphere that most horror comics are lacking, keeping the colors dark and deep while adding a fluidity that makes it not necessarily a fast read, but one that you can see unfold without feeling clunky or patchwork, even when jumping to different characters. So all in all, a solid addition to any collection, especially if you're a horror junkie like I am. Time to dodge roll into Titan Comics Dark Soul #1, written by George Mann, artwork by Alan Kaw, and colors by Komakaki Studios featuring Nora Core TCS. We follow someone named Fira on her quest through Ishra as the blight curse is taking over her mind slowly. Very slowly. And it may not even be the blight, because every other line in this is illusion this, illusion over there, everything's an illusion. Dark Souls really has a rich history and lore that could most definitely translate well to comics, particularly the visuals, and making it something super epic that could expand the universe and exploring the world that has been put forth. I'm going to say this right now, this was most definitely not that. It was actually far more generic and safe than it had any right to be. The art itself is not bad. If you look at the character models, they look fine in an off-center way, but the visuals clash without getting to that same jaw-dropping sense that the game had, and then you add in the fight scenes, which are stiff and rigid, which works basically against the game mechanic of a fluidity to what you do. And all that's compounded with the fact that Fira and the two other people in this comic won't shut up for 5 minutes. This is a mediocre swords and sorcery book, at best. There was never a point in this that made you go, okay, this is totally Dark Souls. And frankly, there's been 4 games. Yes, I know Demon Souls doesn't really count anymore, so there's no excuse for this. And this is such a shame, because under a different name, it would have potential. Like, if this was, Dark Fantasy #1 or something, you would have had potential. But starting out on this misstep, I can't do anything but say ignore it. There is so much potential, and it's really sad how flat this is. Honestly, I'm actually going to do it if I did it, solely because there's a billion different ways they could have done this, and it fell flat for me. Now let's travel back into space with Chapterhouses, The Fourth Planet #1, written by Fred Kennedy, with art by Miko Masiezek. When a ship lands on an alien planet, the crew becomes entangled into a war that has dominated the native species for a good long while. This is the pinnacle of making a comic book property a stunning, breathtaking piece of literature. The plot is very much a space fantasy that mixes the politics and intrigue of Game of Thrones with the futuristic regality of Frank Herbert's Dune. Seeing the stories of 3 separate species unfold next to one another really ramps up the epic nature to this, and the real high-end nature of the art amplifies the highbrow nature of the story. So my verdict is, now more than ever, this book deserves to be on your shelf and in your digital library. Seriously, it's a book that you'll both love to read and love to show off. Now, I did cover this in a special previews review, and I really did say a lot more than I can in these quick reviews, so click the annotation wherever, or the link below to see a solid few minutes of me gushing about the beauty and wonder of this book. Now we take the joyful way into space with Boom Studios Joyride #1, written by Jackson Lansing and Colin Kelly, art by Marcus 2, with colors by Irma Nivola. A bored girl who seems to know far too much referential slang about the 21st century gets her high-profile military guy friend to take her joyriding on the moon. But then they get spotted by another person part of the military and get chased. All 3 of them get mixed up on a slaver ship and eventually becomes the pilot to it, so now they can joyride into the stars on a stolen spaceship. Reading the Comixology description of this, it brings up that this is perfect for those who liked Young Avengers and The Runaways, and that is a bold statement. But I don't think it's too far from the truth. While this isn't nearly on par with the original Brian K. Vaughan Runaways run, or the first volume of Young Avengers, it definitely is a fun read. There's a solid potential for the future, and exploring the universe should be fun, especially with who is on the ship. Now, there's a couple things that do grate on me personally to an extent within this story. The biggest one is the dialogue from the lead character, Uma. She's the one that basically seems to only know how to speak like a 21st century kid, which is neat when they slip in postmodern slang in there and stuff like that. That works. But then she'll turn around and call someone a weirdo Nazi, and the person who she called that, who is part of the military by the way, doesn't know what the hell a Nazi is. I get that it adds fun to the teen characters, or at least this personal teen character, but it always rubs me the wrong way when it's done as awkwardly as this, because that little retort makes it seem like this one teen who isn't a member of the Allied Youth Military Force knows all about a historical military force like the Nazis, but those that would clearly have a military history and tactics course in their training wouldn't. I know that's just something that held up in my mind, but frankly something that I noticed from a couple other people I talked to about this. Uma's kind of a weak character. I don't mean weak as in like she needs help or anything, but she's weak in the fact that literally this entire 20 pages is her pulling off a perfect plan that totally went exactly the way she wanted, even though they crashed while being chased by a private and everything, all going off, so now she has a ship. The story itself has potential and the characters can definitely expand and grow. Like I said, it's just something that got to me, and I noticed a couple other people felt kind of the same way. It's not a bad book by any means, and it is solidly worth a read, at the very least. It's just those are some of the things that held up on me. Overall, the visuals are great, the premise is solid enough to hold me over for at least 1 or 2 more issues, so go out and give it a read for yourself. And finally, we dive into Dark Horses, Department H, written and drawn by Matt Kent, with colors by Charlene Kent. In a special facility on the ocean's floor, a murder takes place. It is up to Mia to solve the crime, trapped in there with the man, or woman, who murdered her father. I'm going to say right now that the only thing that I fear on this planet is under the ocean. Not sharks or anything like that, but that crushing weight that comes from the deep dark unknown of it. And this plays very well with that. Using Mia, who's been an astronaut, to get to the very heart of the ocean for this really gives voice to that feeling. Similarly, the art style works very well to keep a cramped feel in both the facility and the interactions. It's a great piece that I think straddles both the psychological and crime elements swimmingly. Not sure if I meant to make that joke or not. Anyways, and Charlene Kint's colors add a really neat noir style undertone to the whole thing. So, for this underwater sci-fi crime noir, the verdict is easy to deduce. Go out and buy it now. And that's all we have for this fantastic pull for first issue. But don't touch that dial. Do people still get that term? The don't touch that dial? Doesn't matter. Don't go anywhere, because after the ad break, we've got a flashback rant about all new Hawkeye, Manga Firsty on Berserk, and the webcomic Firstish is on Brat-Halla. See you in less than a minute. Welcome back. Today I'll be doing another bit of a rant for Flashback Firsty, so I should just warn you right off the bat, it'll be ranty. Originally released November 11th, 2015, this is actually the second version of Marvel's all-new Hawkeye #1, written by Jeff Lemire and art by Ramon Perez. Now, this is a rant that I've had before, but now that the series has come out for more than 1 or 2 issues, I think I can give it an even better rant than before. The first issue is not bad, as it is setting up where both Hawkeyes are in the present and showcases how their current falling out feeds into the new old man future. As I said, it's not bad. I honestly say it's really not. But Lemire and Marvel editorial as a whole don't really know what to do with Clint Barton. See, when Fraction got signed on to do a Hawkeye book, which I assume was solely because he was also appearing in the Avengers in 2012, so they wanted to bank on everyone in that getting a book. In it, Clint isn't seen in the best light, with having some truly pitiful moments, and being run ragged and pissed on by life, which is true enough to character, and he's never shown in any lesser or greater light than who he is. The whole story was predominantly him defending a brownstone against mobsters and tracksuits. But since editorial stayed away from it, it was a Marvel Now hit, so it's not allowed to bow out gracefully. Then comes Lemire for the first all-new Hawkeye series, which wasn't bad per se either, with giving a good look at Clint's childhood, but then it started the trend of making Clint seem far worse than he was to make Kate look even better. And then this version rolls around, and poof, it literally keeps going. Isn't Kate awesome? Screw Clint! The biggest problem, I think, is that Lemire isn't a good street writer. He's fantastic when he's in his element, which is typically in the indie scene, or like I brought up last week, when he's playing around with surrealism and the mind. But the trick is that DC lets him at least go indie enough to give him some solid hits along the way. I mean, if you compare this to his Green Arrow run, you'll see what I mean. So instead of this series being a continuation of Clint outside of the Avengers, building his place in the world or anything, it's just another standard, and here's some S.H.I.E.L.D. stuff, because organizations are awesome. And as we saw in Secret Avengers, that could work, but it's just so muddled by basically a one-shot Old Man Clint story being used to pad out a series that doesn't need to happen. Like I said before, this first issue isn't bad, and really this series as a whole has been a matter of, if you didn't read the Fraction version, you'll probably dig this to some extent. But I don't see it becoming anyone's favorite book, or even remotely as beloved as Fraction's Hawkeye was. And looking at the sales, yeah, there's a reason for that, Marvel. But let's move away from a book that I've not heard anyone really talking about towards yet another very popular manga. Suggested by Nick Prodes, originally published by Monthly Animal House on August 25th, 1989, this is Berserk, Chapter 1, The Black Swordsman, by Kentaro Miura. While I was going to originally do the Berserk prototype one-shot thing that came out before the actual manga series, my pit full of manga readers said that it really held no bearing on the actual series and actually contradicted some of the manga proper, so I said screw it, and wouldn't you know, that's what Guts, the lead character, is doing when we start this series. I know, great segue. But so yes, Guts, the main man of this series, is having sex with a woman before she turns into a demon, and without missing a thrust, he kills her. Then we cut to a bar, where some jackasses are throwing knives at a bound-up elf. Guts kills the men, though not because of the elf abuse, but rather to give their master a message, which does lead Guts to being taken to the dungeon of the castle, whipped and beaten by an army of men. But luckily enough, after a hell of a beating, Puck, the fairy/elf thing he saved earlier, has some healing ability, and she saves him. Though Guts clears up that he had no intentions of freeing Puck from the bar, Puck tearfully leaves. That actually covers the first 50 or so pages of the first volume, well over my typical covering, since I usually just do strictly chapter 1, but this grabs you and doesn't let you go. Compared to things that I've done in the past, Berserk wasn't put out in a weekly format, so it was allowed to be grander per volume than the episodic style I've done pretty much all the time before. But no matter, let's talk quality. It's super and great. When it comes to Guts, the main character, he's a standard anime badass, which given when this came out, he's probably one of the original anime badasses. Or manga badasses, technically, with good reason. He's got the standard epic sharp paddle of iron, or a buster sword if you're into the Final Fantasy scene, and even a mechanical arm with a crossbow thing attached. Now, as a whole, this series really does question the morality of humans, as well as isolation, camaraderie, and so many other great things in its entirety, but here, the world is only setting up, and we don't even meet Griffin or the Band of the Hawk, which is when things really get going. When it comes to the anime, I've seen the first few episodes, and it really gets to the meat of the themes quicker, and I honestly kind of like it more, possibly because of that. But this is still a phenomenal manga, and a must-own collection for any manga library. Currently, the translation to Berserk is being put out by Dark Horse Comics in partnership with Digital Manga Publishing. And finally, we have Webcomic's Firstish. Originally posted December 9th, 2003, Brat-Halla, written by Jeffrey Stevenson, drawn by Seth Damoose, and letters by Jim Keplinger, and starting with number 2, colors by L. Jamal Walton. Though they put it so much better than I do, and I think the colorist and letterer may change throughout. So what do you get when you unleash kiddie versions of Norse mythology into the world? Well, you get one hell of a comedy. For the most part, this is a really great webcomic that basically has the Funny Papers comic strip style, with each entry being its own thing for a joke. But that's not a problem, because all the jokes work. However, I know there's going to be some people who may only know Norse mythology from reading Marvel Comics, so there's going to be some confusion about characters, as this plays with actual Norse mythology very well. I mean, the third one has Odin dressed as Santa Claus, and eventually Odin's eye becomes a character. If you don't understand those, I'm sorry. Now, as for the art, it's also quite good. Stylistically, it's going with the cartoony look that actually feels like it could be a slightly older version of Scotty Young's artwork, which is funny because it came out in 2003, long before I've ever heard of Scotty Young, but throughout, it grows into being more serialized with multi-part stories, and the art also grows. While the colorist does change, I do believe that Jeffrey and Seth stick around as writer and artist for the entire run. Sadly, as of January 2011, after about 415 main story pages, this series did end. But there is no reason to not check this out. It is still so worth binge reading, especially when it really hits its stride a few issues in, and my god is it glorious, even if you don't understand Norse mythology wholly. Granted, even understanding Norse mythology, sometimes you just may not get a joke, and that's the nature of humor. But anyways, the link to this is in the description below, so go and check it out right now. And that's all for this week. If you agree or disagree, or have a suggestion for any of the flashback segments, please leave a comment below. Don't forget to follow me on Twitter at Bradley Nephilim, and like the Archivist on Facebook. Again, all links are down below. And if you did like the video, give us a thumbs up and share this video around. Help the show by making the channel grow. I'm the Archivist, and stay golden, Inklings.